Have you ever watched your parents hand your sibling everything you ever dreamed of while telling you that struggle builds character? I'm Matilda, I'm 29 years old, and I spent most of my life believing I was the problem in my family. I thought, maybe I wasn't working hard enough, wasn't grateful enough, wasn't deserving enough. But what happened on my brother's 18th birthday changed everything I thought I knew about family, fairness, and my own worth. And what my parents discovered about my life 3 years later left them speechless in ways I never could have imagined. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or wondered why some children seem to get everything, while others get lectures about earning their place in the world, this story is going to hit close to home. And I promise you, by the end, you'll understand that sometimes the greatest gift toxic family dynamics can give you is the motivation to prove them completely wrong. Let me take you back to where this all started, because the patterns were there. Long before that devastating birthday morning, I was always what you might call the responsible one in our family. While my younger brother Tyler played video games and hung out with friends, I was the one helping mom with dinner, doing extra chores without being asked, and maintaining straight A's because I somehow understood, even as a child, that my place in the family felt conditional in ways his never did. My parents owned a successful accounting firm, and we lived comfortably in a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs. Money wasn't tight, but the way it flowed in our household followed. Patterns that took me years to fully recognize. Tyler got new clothes for each school year while I learned to shop clearance racks and make last season's clothes work. When he wanted to join the expensive traveling soccer team, my parents signed him up immediately. When I wanted to take art classes at the community center, I was told we needed to see if it fit in the budget, and maybe I could earn half the money myself. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I started working at 14, not because we needed the money, but because I was told it would teach me responsibility and the value of hard work. Tyler was never given the same character-building opportunities. Instead, my parents worried that a job might interfere with his sports and social life. I spent my high school years splitting time between classes, homework, and shifts at the local grocery store, watching other kids participate in activities and social events I couldn't afford to join. The most painful part wasn't even the financial inequality. It was the way my parents framed these differences. When I asked why Tyler didn't need to work, they explained that he was more focused on his athletics and that college scouts might be watching. When I pointed out that I had talents, too, my mom would give me this patient smile and suggest that my strength was in being practical and self-sufficient. They had convinced themselves and tried to convince me that giving me less was actually giving me more in terms of life skills and character development. College application time revealed just how deep these patterns ran. Tyler's SAT prep courses cost $2,000, paid for without question. When I asked about prep courses, my dad suggested I check out books from the library and take the free practice tests online. Tyler applied to 12 schools, including several expensive private colleges, with application fees paid by our parents. I applied to 3 state schools and worked extra shifts to cover my own application fees. The day our acceptance letters came in, the contrast in my parents' reactions was impossible to ignore. Tyler got into his second-choice school, a private college with $45,000 annual tuition, and my parents immediately started planning how they'd make it work financially. I got into my first-choice state school with a partial academic scholarship, and while they said they were proud, the celebration felt perfunctory compared to the excitement surrounding Tyler's acceptance. When it came time to discuss college funding, the family meeting felt like a business negotiation for me and a blank check discussion for Tyler. My parents explained that they'd cover Tyler's tuition and housing because his education was an investment in his future career in sports management. For me, they'd calculated that my scholarship, plus what I'd saved from working, plus student loans, should cover most of my expenses. I'd need to keep working part-time during college and maybe take out additional loans for my final 2 years. I remember sitting in that living room, listening to them justify why my brother's education was worth $180,000 of their money, while mine was worth a family loan I'd need to pay back with interest, and feeling something inside me shift. It wasn't anger yet. I was still too conditioned to accept their reasoning. It was more like a cold realization that I was truly on my own, in ways I'd been too young to fully understand before. college became my escape and my proof ground. While Tyler enjoyed the full university experience with his expenses covered, I threw myself into academics with an intensity that worried my roommates. I worked 20 hours a week in the campus library, maintained a 3.9 GPA, and spent summers taking extra courses instead of going home. I majored in computer science with a minor in business, despite my parents' subtle suggestions that I consider teaching or nursing. Practical careers for women, they said. The visits home during college breaks became increasingly difficult. Tyler's stories about his fraternity, spring break trips, and internships he could afford to take unpaid were met with enthusiasm and pride. My academic achievements and work accomplishments received polite acknowledgement. When I made Dean's CUA's Mainomo list 3 semesters in a row, my mom mentioned it briefly to my aunt. When Tyler made his intramural softball team, she posted about it on Facebook with 3 paragraphs about his athletic dedication. Junior year brought the first major family crisis that would reveal the true depth of their favoritism. Tyler was struggling academically and socially, partying too much, and skipping classes. His GPA had dropped to 2.1, and he was in danger of losing his scholarship. The family solution was immediate and comprehensive. They hired a private tutor for $75 per hour, arranged for him to take summer classes to bring up his grades, and sent him to a $3,000 leadership retreat designed to help unfocused college students find direction. When I mentioned during that same period that I was struggling to afford both textbooks and rent, and asked if they could help with 1 month's rent so I wouldn't have to choose between working more hours and maintaining my study schedule, they suggested I look into additional financial aid options and maybe consider taking lighter course, loads to work more hours. The contrast wasn't lost on me, but I was still trapped in the pattern of accepting their explanations about Tyler needing more support. Because he was struggling, senior year changed everything. I graduated summa cum laude, secured a position with a tech startup in Silicon Valley with a starting salary of $85,000, and had 3 job offers to choose from. Tyler graduated with a 2.7 GPA, no job prospects, and moved back home to figure out his next steps. The family response to our respective situations was the beginning of my awakening. My job offers were met with concern about me moving so far away and questions about whether I was sure I wanted such a demanding career. Tyler's unemployment was treated as a temporary setback that required family support and understanding. They converted the basement into an apartment for him, covered his expenses, and helped him enroll in a career counseling program. I moved to California, threw myself into my new career, and slowly began to build a life that felt entirely my own for the first time. The distance gave me perspective I'd never had before. I started seeing a therapist who helped me understand that the family dynamics I'd grown up accepting weren't normal or healthy. She introduced me to concepts like golden child syndrome and scapegoating that finally gave names to patterns I'd experienced but never understood. For 2 years, I visited home twice a year, maintained polite contact, and watched from a distance. As Tyler continued to struggle with direction, while my parents continued to subsidize his exploration, I got promoted twice, started investing in real estate, and began building genuine wealth. My family's interest in my success seemed to correlate directly with how much money I might be able to contribute to family events or Tyler's ongoing support needs. Then came Tyler's 18th birthday. Wait, let me clarify. Tyler's 24th birthday. The birthday that changed everything and finally forced me to see my family's priorities with brutal clarity. I had flown home for the celebration, taking time off from a crucial project at work because family birthdays were still important to me despite everything. I arrived to find the driveway decorated with balloons and a brand new BMW 328i with a giant red bow on the hood. The car cost $40,000 and my parents had bought it outright as Tyler's birthday gift. Standing in that driveway, watching my parents beam with pride as Tyler jumped up and down like a teenager, I felt something break inside me. This was the same family that had told me to save up for bus fare in high school. The same parents who had suggested I take student loans for college while fully funding his education. The same people who had questioned every expense I'd ever requested while handing him a car worth more than I'd made in my first year after graduation. But what happened next was worse than the car itself. As the family gathered around taking pictures and celebrating, my mom pulled me aside and asked if I could contribute to Tyler's car insurance since it was going to be quite expensive and he was still getting on his feet financially. She suggested that since I was doing so well in my career, it might be nice if I could help support my brother during this transitional time. I stood there staring at this woman who had just watched her husband hand their adult son a luxury car, asking me to pay for the insurance. The same woman who had never once offered to help with my expenses, even when I was eating ramen noodles for dinner because textbooks had consumed my food budget. The irony was so profound, it felt like a physical blow. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done pretending this was normal. I was done accepting explanations about why I needed to struggle while Tyler needed support. I was done being the responsible one who contributed more than she received and was grateful for the privilege. The next morning, I had a conversation with my parents that I'd been avoiding for years. I asked them directly about the difference in treatment Tyler and I had received throughout our lives. I presented it calmly, with specific examples and dollar amounts. I wasn't angry or emotional. I was simply requesting an explanation for patterns that no longer made sense to me. Their response was everything I expected and nothing I was prepared for. They denied that there had been any favoritism. They insisted that they had always treated us equally, just differently based on our individual needs. Tyler needed more support because he was more sensitive and struggled more. I was naturally independent and capable, so I needed less help. They were proud of how self-sufficient I'd become, and they hoped I could see that their parenting approach had made me stronger. When I pointed out specific financial disparities, they became defensive. When I mentioned feeling unsupported during college while Tyler received comprehensive assistance, they suggested I was being ungrateful for everything they had done for me. When I asked why Tyler's struggles required $40,000 cars, while my struggles required character-building work experiences, they accused me of being jealous of my brother's success. That conversation lasted 3 hours and ended with my mother in tears, insisting that they loved us both equally and couldn't understand why I was trying to create problems in our family. My father suggested that my therapist was filling my head with ideas and that I should focus on gratitude instead of resentment. Tyler, meanwhile, said nothing, apparently uncomfortable with the conversation, but unwilling to acknowledge the disparities. I was describing, I flew back to California that day, knowing I needed space to process what had happened and what it meant for my relationship with my family going forward. The therapy sessions that followed were intense and revealing. My therapist helped me understand that my parents' behavior wasn't about my worth or Tyler's worth. It was about their own psychology, their fears, and their dysfunctional beliefs. About parenting and family roles, I spent the next year setting boundaries. I stopped contributing financially to family events. I declined to help with Tyler's expenses when my parents made suggestions about family members supporting each other. I limited my visits home and kept conversations surface level to avoid conflict. It was lonely and difficult, but it was also freeing in ways I hadn't expected. During this time, my career took off in ways that exceeded my wildest expectations. The startup I joined went public, and my stock options made me financially independent at 27. I bought a house in Palo Alto, started my own consulting company, and began investing in other tech startups. By the time I turned 28, my net worth exceeded 7 figures, and I was being featured in industry publications as one of the youngest successful female entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. My family knew none of this. Our conversations remained focused on surface-level topics, and I deflected questions about my work and finances. I wasn't hiding my success to punish them. I was protecting myself from having my achievements minimized or turned into requests for financial support. I needed my accomplishments to be mine, free from the family dynamics that had shaped my entire life. The revelation moment came exactly 1 year after the BMW birthday. I was back home for Christmas, maintaining my polite but distant approach to family interactions. Tyler had crashed the BMW 3 months earlier. Not seriously, but enough to total the car. My parents had already started shopping for a replacement vehicle and discussing whether they should buy or lease this time. Christmas morning brought the usual gift exchange, where Tyler received expensive electronics and clothes while I got generic gift cards and books. I'd grown comfortable with these patterns and no longer felt hurt by them. But then my phone started buzzing with notifications in ways it never had before. The Forbes article had just gone live online. 30. Under 30. Tech Entrepreneurs Reshaping Silicon Valley featured a full-page spread about my company, complete with professional photos and quotes about my journey from small-town beginnings to tech industry success. The article mentioned my net worth, my company's revenue projections, and my plans for expansion into new markets. My cousin Emma, who followed me on social media, saw the article and shared it on Facebook, tagging my entire extended family. Within an hour, my phone was flooded with congratulations from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. My aunt called my mother to ask why she hadn't mentioned that I was featured in Forbes. My grandfather left a voicemail saying he'd never been prouder of a grandchild. I watched my parents' faces as they read the article on my aunt's phone, passed around the family Christmas gathering like a piece of stunning news about a stranger. The progression of emotions was fascinating to observe from my new perspective of therapeutic distance. First came shock, then pride, then confusion, then something that looked almost like grief. My mother approached me later that evening, holding a printed copy of the article. She told me she had no idea I'd become so successful and asked why I'd never mentioned any of this during our calls. The question was so genuinely bewildered that I almost felt sorry for her. She truly didn't understand that the family dynamics that had shaped our entire relationship had made it impossible for me to share my achievements without risking having them diminished or exploited. I explained, gently but clearly, that I had learned early in life that my accomplishments were received differently than Tyler's, and that I had decided to keep my professional success private to protect it from family dynamics that had hurt me in the past. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply stating facts about patterns that had shaped my choices. The conversation that followed revealed just how deep my parents' lack of awareness had been. They genuinely believed they had supported me appropriately, and that any differences in treatment had been based on our different personalities and needs. They had no understanding of how their favoritism had affected me or how it had shaped my relationship with our family. When my father asked why I hadn't come to them for investment opportunities or business advice, I reminded him of the conversation about college expenses and how my education had been treated as a luxury I needed to fund myself, while Tyler's had been treated as a family investment. When my mother suggested that we could be closer now that they understood my success, I explained that closeness required understanding and acknowledgement of past patterns, not just awareness of current achievements. The weeks that followed brought a flood of attempts at connection from my family. My parents wanted to visit my house in California, meet my business partners, and understand my industry. Tyler called to apologize for never speaking up during our family dynamics growing up, though his apology felt more motivated by my current success than by genuine understanding of past problems. The most revealing moment came when my mother suggested that Tyler could benefit from my mentorship and business connections as he tried to figure out his career direction. She proposed that I could help him get started in tech, or maybe even hire him at my company. The suggestion was made with complete sincerity, as if the idea of me supporting Tyler was natural and obvious now that I had the means to do so. I realized then that my parents' understanding of our relationship hadn't fundamentally changed. They were excited about my success and wanted to benefit from it, but they hadn't grasped the deeper issues about respect, equality, and healthy family dynamics. They were proud of what I'd accomplished, but they still saw me primarily as a resource for Tyler's benefit. The conversation about Tyler working for me became the catalyst for the deepest discussion my family and I had ever had about our relationship patterns. I explained that I wasn't willing to use my professional success to subsidize the same family dynamics that had shaped my childhood. If Tyler wanted career mentorship, he could ask for it directly and accept that I might decline based on my own boundaries and business needs. If my parents wanted a relationship with me, it needed to be based on mutual respect rather than my utility to the family system. That conversation was painful for everyone involved, but it was also necessary. My parents had to confront the reality that their parenting approach had damaged our relationship in ways that couldn't be fixed by simply acknowledging my success. Tyler had to face the fact that his advantages had come at the cost of his sister's sense of belonging in the family. I had to accept that healing our family relationships would require ongoing work and might never result in the closeness I had once wanted. 6 months later, my parents entered family therapy. Not because I demanded it, but because they genuinely wanted to understand how their choices had affected both their children and how they could build healthier relationships going forward. Tyler got a job at a marketing firm and started paying his own expenses for the first time in his adult life. I began sharing more about my life and work, but within boundaries that protected my emotional well-being. The transformation wasn't dramatic or complete, but it was real. My parents began acknowledging the favoritism patterns they had denied for years. They started treating my time and achievements with the same respect they gave Tyler's. They stopped making suggestions about how I could use my resources to support other family members. Most importantly, they began seeing me as an individual with my own needs and boundaries, rather than as the strong one who didn't require support. Tyler and I developed a different relationship too, one based on mutual respect rather than family. Obligation. He acknowledged the advantages he'd received and the burdens I'd carried. I stopped feeling responsible for his struggles or resentful of his privileges. We became siblings who genuinely liked each other instead of just people who shared parents and history. The healing process taught me that vindication isn't about proving your worth to people who doubted you. It's about reaching a place where their doubts no longer define your sense of self. My success in business was satisfying, but the real victory was learning to set boundaries that protected my emotional well-being, regardless of my family's approval or understanding. Today, 3 years after that Forbes article changed everything, my relationship with my family is better than it's ever been. But it's also fundamentally different. It's based on mutual respect, rather than family obligation, honest communication rather than assumed roles, and healthy boundaries rather than toxic patterns. My parents have learned to see both their children as individuals with different needs, and Tyler has learned to build his own life without depending on family subsidies. I still struggle sometimes with the years I spent believing I wasn't worthy of the same investment and support Tyler received naturally. Therapy helps, but some wounds take time to fully heal. What I've learned is that family relationships can change and improve, but only when everyone involved is willing to acknowledge past patterns and commit to building something healthier. If you're watching this because you've experienced similar favoritism or financial inequality in your family, I want you to know that your worth isn't determined by how your family treats you. The qualities that made you resilient in the face of unfair treatment, your work ethic, your independence, your determination, those are strengths that will serve you throughout your life. Don't let anyone convince you that receiving less support made you stronger if it just made you feel unloved. Success, whatever that looks like for you, is the best response to people who underestimated your worth. But more importantly, building a life that reflects your values and boundaries is the best gift you can give yourself. You don't owe anyone access to your achievements, especially people who didn't support you when you were building them. Family. Relationships are complicated, and healing is possible, but it requires honesty about past patterns and commitment to change from everyone involved. Don't accept surface-level pride in your achievements from people who didn't support your struggles. Real reconciliation requires acknowledgement of harm and genuine behavior change, not just appreciation for your success. Have you experienced favoritism in your family that affected your sense of worth or belonging? Have you had to set boundaries with family members who treated you differently than other siblings? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below, because sharing these experiences helps all of us understand that we're not alone in these struggles. Building healthy relationships. And achieving success despite family dysfunction is possible, but it takes time, boundaries, and often professional support. You deserve relationships that celebrate your worth consistently, not just when it benefits others. You deserve to build a life that reflects your values, regardless of your family's expectations or limitations. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing and sharing it with others who might need to hear that their experiences are valid and their worth isn't determined by family treatment. Building community around these shared experiences helps all of us heal and grow stronger together. Remember, your value doesn't decrease because someone failed to see it, and your success doesn't require anyone's permission or approval. Sometimes, the greatest gift a dysfunctional family can give you is the motivation to prove them wrong and the strength to build something better for yourself.